Harp on Sports, the Bar, podcast, media, audio, and radio network. Oh, what do we have in store for you on this edition of the program? Caitlin Clark's crown, as she comes up short again, and now the debate around her centers in her greatness. Where does she rank amongst the all-time greats? She didn't win a title. Does that matter? It doesn't. If you're intelligent, it doesn't. We're going to tell you why. Also, the Edey experience with what UConn's done this tournament, what Purdue has done this tournament. This is Zach Edey's Final Four, his shining moment. And I know what Hurley, and look, I know what UConn's done, and I know how good they've been. But if Purdue can win it, it's the first Big Ten title in a quarter century almost. And it's also, Purdue's first championship ever. And Zach Edey will be, no matter what he does professionally, amongst the all-time greats in tournament performances. He's averaging like 25 and 15 a game. It's unheard of. More than that. So we're going to look at that as well. And the Gators get swept in baseball. Why? They were playing with fire, and they were smoke and mirroring it, and they were coming back and winning games and coming through in the clutch, but the law of averages eventually caught up for the Gators. And I'll tell you why. This week is make or break week for them. This week is monumental. The next 8 games for them are everything. They could be below 500 heading into the last week of April. So we'll look at that as well. Again, Harp on Sports, the Bar, podcast, media, audio, radio network. Follow, share, like, subscribe at Harp on Sports Twitter, at Harp on Sports Instagram, Harp on Sports, the auditory route, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Harp on Sports, the Bar, Harp on Sports Facebook page, Harp on Sports, the Bar, the YouTube channel, and of course, harponsports.com. So here it is. End of the line for Caitlin Clark. South Carolina goes undefeated. What a run. What a run. At one point, South Carolina's bench points were 40-0 or 30-0. They had over 50 rebounds, 20 plus on the offensive end. I don't think I've ever seen a game where a front court dominated as much as South Carolina's did at any level, and it was only a single-digit game in the final few minutes. When you out-rebound your opponent by almost 30, I mean, if Clark doesn't go on that crazy run to start the game, South Carolina beats him by 20. They just didn't have any answer for Cardozo or anybody else underneath. They just didn't. So there you go. South Carolina was the better team. South Carolina was undefeated. South Carolina was number one, and they proved it. And to the point that a stronger front court, I think both LSU and UConn probably would have given South Carolina a better game at the end. But it was a star, the biggest star in sports, in American sports today. Gave them a shot late in the fourth quarter. Just missed a couple shots. Too much. So now the debate begins. Where does she rank? And now you have can you be an all-time great? Can you be the greatest without winning a championship? And everybody says you have to win a championship to be the greatest. Oh, okay. Well, look, if you want to do that, that's fine. Then Ted Williams is gone in baseball. So is Barry Bonds. You can't even consider those two, can you? Ernie Banks? Can't even consider them. You can't. You have to win a championship. Oh, bye Ted Williams. Bye Ernie Banks. Bye Barry Bonds. Sorry. So sorry. And you can go up and down the list and find guys that had monumental and monstrous careers. Sorry. That's baseball. What about basketball? Well, goodbye, Charles. Patrick Ewing. Patrick Ewing can't be the greatest center of all time. You may say, oh, Seth, he's not. Oh, okay. All-time greats, the greatest. And it's one of those things that she's the greatest shooter I've ever seen. I don't know how that's up for debate. Greatest basketball player ever? Okay, fine, no. I've never seen anybody shoot like her. And again, Steph Curry's the greatest shooter of all time, but Steph Curry's not the greatest basketball player of all time. That's fine. She's the greatest shooter I've ever seen. Women's, I mean, she is. I don't even know how that's even up for debate. Greatest player of all time? Those 9 girls on Iowa, besides her, do any of them see any playing time today if they're on South Carolina? If you took Caitlin Clark off that Iowa team, are they above 500? She's amazing. Other sports, Dan Marino in football. I mentioned Charles Barkley in basketball. And what's funny is a couple weeks ago, she broke a guy's record, didn't she? Oh, Pete Maravich is the greatest college basketball player of all time. Pete Maravich is the greatest shooter, greatest scorer of all time. He never won a title at LSU, did he? Pete Maravich never won a title. So we're having this discussion a couple weeks ago how she's not Pete Maravich. Pete Maravich is better. Okay. Pete Maravich is better. Pete Maravich is the greatest college basketball shooter ever. Greatest college basketball player ever. Okay. Never won a title. So you just can't change the rules because you don't like her or you don't like the sport. And there's nothing wrong with saying she's the greatest shooter ever. Or she's the greatest player ever. Well, everything has got to be this greatest or number one or the best of all time. Just enjoy this every now and then. Enjoy it. I enjoyed it. The women's tournament was the last week. Well, you got out of the women's tournament with LSU and Iowa on Monday all the way to what you got on Sunday Iowa had to play 3 games in 7 days. Didn't they? It's a lot. So did South Carolina. No, South Carolina do 3 and 8. I just look around and I look at this and say to myself, hey, you can consider her the greatest shooter ever. Greatest player ever. If you don't want to, that's fine. But if you are discounting her just because she didn't win a championship, then Ted Williams can't be the greatest hitter of all time, can he? Never won. Charles Barkley. Well, I mean, think about this. Think about that dream team. Think about that dream team in 1992. Barkley never won an NBA title. Ewing never won an NBA title. Stockton never won an NBA title. Malone never won an NBA title. Chris Mullin never won an NBA title. Well, my MJ's the greatest. Oh, okay, that's fine. But if you're going to say you can't say Pete Maravich is the greatest men's college basketball player ever. Never won a title. That's why I always said the greatest of all time. You got to win rings. Okay, now you got to win multiple rings. Okay, well, how many do you have to win? I never seen anything like her in my life. And that's okay to leave it at that. All right, from that to this. The men's Final Four. I thought we got exactly what we would get. I mean, you couldn't ask for any more than Iowa against South Carolina women's. And the fact that the Friday night women's game between Iowa and UConn's now the most watched game ever. Isn't it funny? Like Caitlin Clark's played in 4 of the 5 most watched women's games ever, or 5 of the 6 most watched women's games ever. In the men's Final Four, look, they were both double-digit games. They were controlled. I mean, Purdue controlled that thing. It got within single digits at times, but Purdue controlled that thing. UConn pulled away in the final 10 minutes. I think Monday night's going to be very good. I still think UConn 6 to 10 points better than Purdue. Purdue can beat UConn, but they won't. My mom's alma mater, see if I can speak English today. My mother's alma mater, grandfather went to school there, taught there. I would like to see Purdue win. I would. Are they going to? I just don't know. You know, UConn will have success out on the perimeter. Purdue's going to have to hit like 10 to 12 threes to beat them. UConn just, even when UConn falls asleep, they fall asleep and they're down 2, 3. UConn never finds themselves down 10. They don't. And Zach Edey, you can sit there and say he didn't do much on Saturday night, which, I mean, how's not doing much when you score 20 points and have double-digit rebounds, a double-double. But I'm sure, look, if if UConn approaches Zach Edey the same way, you can do the same thing to Edey that NC State did, that UConn will win by 7 to 10 points. Because Purdue had some some ugly turnovers. What did Purdue have? 8 turnovers in the first half. Got news for you. Purdue turns the ball over 13, 14 times. They're going to get beat by 10 points. I think it's going to be a very good championship game, though. UConn's the best team in college basketball. They were the best team in college basketball last year. These two shared time at 1 and 2 all year, with Houston peeking their nose around the corner. Houston has a big star get hurt in their, Sweet 16 matchup, or maybe we're in a different situation here. So, again, I don't think you can ask for better championship games. Biggest star in women's college basketball, undefeated South Carolina, the defending national champions, and college basketball's player of the year, the women's and the men's player of the year, underdogs in the championship games. The back-to-back women's and the back-to-back men's player of the year, underdogs in championship games against UConn's a pending dynasty. What more could you ask for? And Iowa's a prime example where you don't necessarily need a blue blood, you just need a star. Purdue's a very solid basketball program. They're not a blue blood. Purdue may be the best college basketball program that's never won one. I'm trying to think of another college basketball program that's never won one. Purdue's never won one. Notre Dame's never won one. Right? So that's what we have. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if Purdue won. It would maybe a little bit. I mean, UConn would have to play their worst game of the tournament, and Purdue would have to play their best, and that's where we've been with UConn for a couple years now. You have to play your worst game of the tournament. The other team has to play their best. That's where we were with Iowa and South Carolina. They're going to have to play their worst game of the tournament. You're going to have to play your best. When you need the other team to play their worst, and you can't even go from an A to a B, you have to be an A minus, or it's tough to win. It's tough to win. So there we are on that front. Wanted to wrap with this. Gator baseball, yikes. 17-14 now, 6-6 in the SEC. It's funny, they come into this weekend at 17-11, 6-3 in the SEC, and you're sitting here saying, well, okay, boy, if we get sweep, you're going to be 9-3 in the conference and 20-11 overall, and here you go. Worst team in the conference on the road. Here you go. Mizzou's terrible. Instead, it's your worst nightmare. You get swept by the worst team in the conference. Your starting pitching is very good on Friday and Saturday. I mean, the bats died on Friday and Saturday. Caglione still hits a couple home runs. And you score 10 points. Score 10 runs on Sunday, and it's not enough, and your bullpen gives it up. And, we've been wondering, this team lost to Florida State, but they were masquerading on the weekends by having massive upset. Like they had big come from behind wins against LSU, couple come from behind wins against Mississippi State. And it was like, they're finding ways to win against good teams. And you're trying to figure out what team were they? Were they the team beating the good teams on the weekends, or the teams blowing games in the middle of the week? They're on the ropes. Their season's on the ropes. They're halfway through it, right? They're halfway through their season, regular season now. And this week they got Florida State and South Carolina. Florida State looking for the season sweep for the first time in over a decade. Florida State trying to sweep Florida for the first time in well over a decade. And then you got 3 with South Carolina at home. 2-2 this week gets you to 19-16. Wouldn't you say 2-2 is a luxury this week? If you can go 2-2 this week, it's a luxury. You could be, seriously, you're going to have to claw and scrap and scrape and do everything in your power to go 2-2 this week. You go 1-3 this week, then you're looking at 18-17, heading into a home game with JU on Tuesday of the following week, and then a 3-game set at Vandy. Seven of the next 8 games they're playing a better team. The only team, 7 of the next 8 games, they're playing a better team. Only one they're not is JU. Yikes. And I wrote this down. You got solid pitching, no offense Friday and Saturday, terrible pitching on Sunday. Caglione struggled, and the offense exploded. Caglione hits the home run. It's just, they're young, and they haven't hit their stride. They haven't grown up. They haven't clicked. Now, I point to a team like NC State where you have all this talent and everything clicks and you go on this great run in basketball. We've seen it in baseball over the years. What Coastal Carolina did it one year. Was it Fresno State that did it one year? Teams are going to start pitching around. These SEC teams are going to, they may not need to pitch around Caglione and score 9-10 runs a game. Season on the brink. These next 8 games. Florida's going to have to find a way to go 4-4 in these next 8 games. I said 2-2 this week, 2-2 next week. Going to have to find a way to go 4-4 in these next 10 games. And that's, I'm talking 2-2 in the conference. Or 3-3 in the conference. And 1-1 and lose to Florida State, beat JU. 5-3 is a luxury in those 8. If you can go 5-3, you're 22-17. Got to go 4-4. You go 3-5, you're 20-19. Heading into the last week of April. The year after North Carolina played in the national championship game and lost to Kansas, just last year they made the NIT. They didn't even make the NCAA tournament. So in college basketball, think about this. 2 years ago, North Carolina makes a championship game in basketball, loses to Kansas, doesn't make the tournament the next year. Last year, TCU goes to the championship game in football, barely above 500. Could Florida be that runner-up that doesn't make the tournament? Probably make it, but this weekend you could probably kiss, you go 1-3 this week or 0-4 this week, you probably can start to kiss hosting goodbye. A regional. Probably kiss it goodbye. Harp on Sports, the Bar, podcast, media, audio, radio network. Follow, share, like, subscribe at Harp on Sports Twitter, at Harp on Sports Instagram, Harp on Sports, Auditory Route, Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Harp on Sports, Facebook page, Harp on Sports YouTube channel, of course, harponsports.com. Go Purdue. I think UConn wins by 7, though. Remember, stay clean, stay focused, stay strong. Frankenstein. Have fun with your friends.